to bring it all down. Yes, I know you're burning already from those military press and those raises, but we're going to bring it down again by burning this section of your shoulders. So we're going to use your arms only. If you're in a gym environment, you can decide to pick a few, like a 2 kg or 3 kg dumbbell. Usijiumize sana. Sindio, okay, I am ready. Meanwhile, if you're at home, we could use your arms or you could use a water bottle. In this case, we're going to use our arms to do it. From now, hold it there. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 30 of them. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, slow with me. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30. Well done. Our rest time starts now. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Massage the shoulders. Massage them down because it's burning. So that's 30 reps. So we're going to do another 2 sets of 30. Just to burn it down. It's just bringing, the heat to the shoulders. We have 15 more seconds. Remember, you're watching Evelyn Owala, Tizi Nyumbani. My name is Evelyn Owala of Evolve Health and Fitness, and we're at Tizi Nyumbani. Alright, there we go. Time's up. And thank you guys for keeping me company. Let's do this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, nice and slow, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 27, 28, 29, 30. Clap for yourself if you've done the second one. We have one more to go. I said if you are in a gym environment, usijiue sana, chukua kale kadambel ka 2 kg. Uko tu hapa. Then you will realize, sometimes some of us gym goers, we think that, the heavier the weight, the more the intensity. It's good to measure your strength and, power level. But again, if you're trying to hit a muscle, I am a strong believer in getting, average weight and just making sure you connect to your muscles so that you contract fully. There we go. Time's up. Let's go. Set number 3. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, with me. 3, usipeleke chini. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 30. Well done, well done. Clap for yourself. If you did this workout, especially the finisher, if you did it through with me, definitely you have conquered this day. Go out there and kill it. Do not be afraid. All right. Until our next episode. Bye-bye.
At Jumia, it's Black Friday every Friday. Over 1,000 amazing deals and discounts every day. Jumia Black Fridays, even crazier with DGB.
Introducing Ushindi Cream Bar Soap. It foams well, is gentle on skin and hands, and cleans your clothes and dishes well too. Available in 1 kilogram and 800-gram bars and 175-gram tablets. Also available in all your favorite variants. Ushindi, a quality product from Pwani Oils.
It's Black Friday every Friday. Over 1,000 amazing deals and discounts every day. Jumia Black Fridays, even crazier with DGB.
Tunapata mtoto mimi na Max.
What?
Max was super excited about your story. Where?
Tuna spend karibu siku nzima pamoja. Sema lunch, sema tena mama, we.
Miss me already, babe.
Usijaribu kunitabebu wa mjinga. Kumbe unapanga harusi na Jamila, wewe.
Utendo cheki Sara kwa macho. Alafu msho Sara, mimi ni mwanaume. Na mwanaume haizi angalia chakula ikienda hivi kama vile fisi anaangalia ikienda. Ataingia box pap.
What a relief. Thank you, Gold Crown.
If regular milk makes you feel uncomfortable, try Gold Crown lactose-free milk. Milk that loves you.
This is NTV.
Greetings, East Africa, and welcome to another week where we place focus on your world. Now, on this 23rd day of November, we take time to understand sleep disorders. Now, going by the messages we have received in the recent past, many of us struggle with sleep disorders and have had to revert to Mr. Google to try figure out what we are dealing with. Now, this morning, I will be joined by 3 people living with various sleep disorders and a specialist to help us figure out the science behind these disorders. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and this is what else you can expect. Sleep disorders, again, as I mentioned, today we take a look at the different types and the effects and how to manage them.
Museveni and these brutal people are on their way out.
Bobby Wine has condemned violent clashes between security forces and his supporters in Uganda. South African NGO battles water pollution in filthy rivers. And an 80-year-old sailor embarks on round-the-world trip with an electric boat. Thank you for joining us on the broadcast. As I mentioned, our conversation of the day is sleep disorders. And speaking of which, your question of the day is, do you live with or know someone who suffers from a sleep disorder? This could be sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep paralysis, etc. And what challenges do you face? Talk to us. That hashtag is new normal on our social media handles. And remember, you can also text or call in using that number at the bottom of your screen. But before we get to that interesting conversation, let's take a look at the effects of COVID-19 around the world. And this morning, that number stands at 58,983,531 confirmed cases of COVID-19 globally. 40,765,521 of that number have totally recovered from the same, and unfortunately 1,393,571 people have succumbed to COVID-19 around the world. Now in Kenya, as per yesterday's briefing, that number stands at 77,372 Kenyans who have contracted COVID-19 this far, and out of that number, 51,507 have totally recovered from the same, and unfortunately we have lost 1,380 Kenyans to COVID-19. Now, this is a message you will hear reiterated here on Your World. Do not let your guard down. COVID-19, at least the second wave, is here with us. Wear your mask, social distance, and of course, wash your hands with soap and water regularly. I take a look at stories making headlines this morning, and volunteers from South African NGO Fountain Rivers Earth Sanctuary Henops remove plastic waste from litter traps placed on the Henops River in the Clayville Township in Tembisa, northeast of Johannesburg. The litter traps were placed 2 weeks ago and have already accumulated a large amount of waste. The project also helps unemployed people from the community by paying them to help with cleanups like these.
We started to put the nets up at the beginning of the rainy season to try and stop this huge avalanche. It seems like in the winter a lot of stuff gets informal dumps in the townships and stuff, so all of that stuff gets washed down in the rainy season. So it keeps on the whole summer, but I think the worst stuff is in the beginning, so we're trying to stop it here.
So I think this project is quite an opportunity for the guys in the community, because some of us now it already created employment for us, and then at the same time these places, these plastics makes this environment very dirty, so that in such a way that it's a very dangerous environment.
And still in South Africa, the head of a South African panel investigating rampant state corruption during Jacob Zuma's time in power rejected an application by the ex-president for him to step aside. Zuma, seeking an impartial judge, had demanded that Judge Raymond Zondo recuse himself, accusing him of bias. But Zondo threw out the application, resulting in Zuma walking out of the commission despite a legal summon.
Or to conclude, there is no sound reason why the applicant only raised the issue of a personal relationship between myself and himself close to 3 years after my appointment to to chair this commission. The applicant cannot be allowed to raise this issue so late in the day.
I want to say that we've also been instructed to lodge a complaint about you in that regard to the Judicial Service Commission in respect of the issue about which you've made yourself a witness and a judge. And therefore, Chair, I have no other instruction today or anywhere in the future until we've considered the review, except that we would like to be excused from these proceedings.
As my learned friend puts it, they are excusing themselves from the proceedings. They are in fact acting, well, not they, the applicant would be acting in defiance of the summons and unlawfully. And
it is a pity that he has elected to leave without asking for permission.
Elsewhere, Malawian millionaire preacher Shepherd Bushiri, wanted by South Africa on fraud charges, has been freed by a court in his native country following his arrest on an international warrant.
I have come here looking for the constitutional help that protects the citizen. My life was in danger in South Africa, and I have opened cases against people in South Africa, the police officers who have been arresting me. A lot of death threats. I've survived death attempts and also extortion. It is so disappointing that the government of South Africa is not commenting anything about these people I opened cases against. I'm so excited, but I give all the glory to God. This is not the victory of me. It's not the victory of my lawyers. It's the victory of God. Oh, yes. All the glory and praise go to God. We believe that justice is about to prevail.
I don't know. I'm out of words. Like, yeah, I'm totally happy for it. Like, my father is is given bail, and then, yeah, we need to celebrate with our father today now.
And still on the continent, for Ethiopians who escaped intense fighting in their northern homeland of Tigray by fleeing into Sudan, they are now safe, but the terrifying nightmare of what they witnessed haunts them. I saw bodies dismembered by the explosions, said Ganet Gazedia, a 75-year-old sitting alone in the dust at Rakuba refugee camp in the east of the country, newly opened to cope with a sudden influx into Sudan of over 27,000 people fleeing airstrikes, artillery barrage and massacres in Ethiopia. Distraught at having been forced to flee their homes, traumatized by becoming separated from family members in a mad rush, and horrified after witnessing killings, refugees wonder as if dazed in the camp. A few thousand anti-government protesters defy an indefinite curfew at a Lekki toll gate in Lagos, as ordered by the state governor to curb the demonstrations which went into effect Friday.
We're here because we believe in what we're fighting for. We're firm to it. And if you listen to our national anthem and our national pledge, we are here to defend our unity.
We are fighting for the truth. We are fighting for the label of our heroes past. We don't want it to be in vain. That's why we are here. We are not rioting. We are not stealing. That's why we are not afraid. You cannot fight a sleeping man because it's peaceful. So that's what we are doing here. Nigerian youth are passionate and purpose-driven youths. We are not cowards.
I have children. I'm looking forward to carry my great-grandchildren because my grandmother did, my mother did. If I'm a coward, I wonder what my children will look like. I would prefer to die well for my children to have a better tomorrow The truth is it.
Yes, so wait.
And still in Nigeria, the Nigerian Minister of Information and Culture insists that soldiers did not shoot at protesters who gathered at the Lekki toll gate on 20th October. This comes after CNN released an investigative report on the attack stating that Nigerian military forces fired directly at the peaceful demonstrators, allegedly killing many.
Like everyone else, I watched the CNN report yesterday. I must tell you that it reinforces the disinformation that is going around, and it is blatantly irresponsible and a poor piece of journalistic work by a reputable international news organization. CNN, which touted its report as an exclusive investigative report, sadly relied on the same videos that have been circulating on social media without verification. This is very serious, and CNN should be sanctioned for that. Before deployment, the soldiers were briefed on the rules of engagement, which they adhered to also. 3. Soldiers at the Lekki toll gate fired blank ammunition into the air.
So this press conference will be addressed by the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture.
Closer home, Uganda's opposition presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, aka Bobi Wine, has condemned violent clashes between security forces and his supporters that left at least 37 people dead, marking a violent start to the country's election season.
People power! Our power! People power!
I repeat, Museveni and these brutal people are on their way out. They have failed to account for the 35 years they've been in power. And now all they're left with is murder innocent people. Shame on them.
Please come in a line, come in a line.
He's facing a generation which is both hungry and angry. A generation which is resolved to stop at nothing to get their freedom. A generation which has said in the past and continue to say, we are not your slaves. We have told you before and we continue to tell you that no amount of brutality, no amount of tear gas, no amount of torture or pepper spray is going to stop us.
Well, definitely a story we shall keep an eye on and update you as and when we get the details coming from that Ugandan election scenario. Well, to our conversation of the day, and we're focusing on sleep disorders this morning, and to help us understand more about the same, in studio we're joined by Dr. Dilraj Soki. He is a neurologist at the Aga Khan Hospital University. We're also joined by Blanche Wangoi, who is living with a sleep paralysis. She joins us in the other studio virtually. We have Janice Nyokabi, who lives with Parasomnia, and also joining us virtually we have Marianne Juguna, who lives with Narcolepsy. Now, before we get to that conversation, Dr. Soki, we applaud you and recognize your work during this pandemic, and I think at this point it is prudent that we take time, a moment of silence rather, to just remember those that have lost their lives to COVID-19. You know, in the last couple of days we have lost quite a number of doctors, clinical officers and nurses, and of course many other Kenyans who succumbed to this pandemic. Let's take a moment of silence even as we remember them. Thank you for that. Even as remember those that have succumbed to COVID-19, the medical fraternity is definitely in mourning, but also the country at large, even as we lose Kenyans to COVID-19. So again, we reiterate, do not let your guard down and take the necessary precautions to avert COVID-19 infection. To our conversation of the day, sleep disorders. And at this point, Dr. Soki, it would be prudent to define what sleep disorders are.
Yes, good morning, Gladys, and thank you for inviting us to talk about this very important topic. So sleep disorders have to be defined quite carefully because a lot of us do have problems with sleep all the time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a sleep disorder. And the way to delineate between those is in whom sleep problems are intrusive on your activities of daily life. You can't work effectively, you can't be at home effectively, you can't concentrate on a routine basis, in which case you have to think about whether there is an underlying disorder causing disruption of your normal sleep.
And when we talk about sleep disorders, if we have the graphics ready with this, there are some that have commonly been described or mentioned: insomnia, sleep apnea, restless legs syndrome, narcolepsy, parasomnia, sleep paralysis. Well, these are names and words you'll be hearing even as we continue with our conversation this morning. And speaking of sleep paralysis, as I mentioned, we are joined by Blanche Wangoi in the other studio who lives with sleep paralysis. And Blanche, from your experience, what exactly do you face?
Thank you so much, Gladys. My name is Blanche Wangoi and I'm 24 years old. My first experience on sleep paralysis, or what I think is sleep paralysis, because this is self-diagnosis, it wasn't quite a good one. I remember I was alone at home and it was in the afternoon. It was quite a sunny day. I just went into the house, sat on the couch, and I don't remember what happened, as from me sitting on the couch and waking up to this weirdest, horrific feeling of my body being paralyzed from my chest, arms, down to my legs. But I could feel that my brain was quite awake. I felt like I was seeing blurry visions, and I just felt scared. Suddenly, I saw this figure of a human figure in front of me, looked like a monster with some smoky effect. I don't know what that was. And I felt like it was coming towards me. At least that's what I saw. It was coming towards me with its arms. Maybe, I don't know what it wanted to do to me, maybe strangle me. That's what I felt. I remember screaming for help. I thought that I was calling my mom, my sisters, but there was no one around. And, you know, being a Christian, you think these are demon attacks or ghosts that you're taught in the church, you know, ghost hunting, demon hunting, such stuff. So I started rebuking it. I started calling Jesus, Jesus. And in a few minutes, I felt like I've been released and woke up. It felt so real, so I could distinguish a dream and something like that. It was much more than a dream. So I remember waking up and running out of the house. I sat outside from 2 p.m. until 7 when my mom came back, and I told her about it. She didn't seem much bothered about it. Maybe she thought maybe she could pray for me and it goes away. Yeah, that was my first moment of it.
Okay, so you say you're 24 years old. How long ago was this?
8 years ago, I was 17 years.
And that was the first time you ever experienced it?
Yeah.
After that, how often has it happened?
It doesn't happen quite often, but I've had quite a few.
Okay. Can you correlate when it happens often vis-a-vis when you have staggered episodes?
When it happens to me, it's when I kind of take a nap during the day. Yeah, that's when mostly happens to me.
So you don't feel the same way when you sleep at night?
I've had quite a few episodes at night. But during the day is when like I now wake up. At night when I get like attacked, I transition from now sleep paralysis to total sleep, and then when I wake up is when I'll remember, oh, it happened to me again.
Just before you fell asleep.
Yeah.
Okay, and have you asked any family member to watch you while you sleep to see if there's anything that you do while asleep?
We talk about it. When I wake up, assuming it happened to me at night, my family will definitely be in the house, so I'll just wake up and ask them, did you hear me call you? Did you hear me struggling? They'll be like, no.
Okay, and when you take the afternoon naps, has anyone ever watched you to see if probably you had some sort of, you know, fidgety movements?
I don't know why it always happened to me when I'm alone during the day. Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Soki, sleep paralysis, please define this too as from the science point of view.
Sure, and thank you for sharing your story, Blanche. That's quite interesting. So to understand sleep paralysis, we need to understand what happens when we do sleep. I mean, we spend a third of our life sleeping, and it's only very recently that people have realized exactly what happens during sleep. And there's a few stages that happen when you fall asleep. So the first thing is when you go to sleep, you enter this stage called non-REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movements, and that's when you're dreaming. So that's REM. But the first stage of sleep when you go to sleep is called non-REM. So you're not dreaming at that time, and there's no eye movements. And you slowly drift down from light sleep, called stage 1 and 2, down to stage 3 and 4, which is deep sleep. And that's what happens in the early part of the night. And you keep transitioning between going into non-REM sleep and then rising up to what we call REM sleep. And REM sleep is where you dream. And that cycle happens about every 90 minutes throughout the night. And as the night goes on, the more REM sleep you have. And on average, you probably have about 5 or 6 cycles of REM sleep throughout the night. You asked about the classification of sleep disorders, and the basic classification is either you're sleeping too much, or you're sleeping too little, or your sleep is interrupted. And what Blanche is describing here is an interruption of sleep, or an experience that arouses her from sleep, and it's abnormal, and that's called sleep paralysis. Now, in sleep paralysis, we have to also understand what happens to the body when you switch from non-REM to REM sleep. For us not to act out our dreams when we have it in REM sleep, there's a switch in the brain that disconnects the brain to the rest of the body, so you don't act them out. So if you're dreaming that you're running on a field, you're not actually running inside your bed. Okay? And if you record the brain waves, you put an EEG, so wires on the head to look at brain activity when someone is sleeping, we've seen that when you get to the non-REM sleep, the waves become slower and slower. But as you go into REM sleep, when you're dreaming, your brain is actually awake, just like you are right now, but it's disconnected from the rest of your body. In sleep paralysis, that disconnection is abnormal. It's called a sleep-wake transition abnormality. So the body is waking up, but it's still disconnected. The brain is waking up, but it's still disconnected from the rest of the body. And classically, what people feel is exactly as what Blanche describes, which is you're awake, you feel you're conscious and you know where you are, but you can't move your body. And you have to remember the chest muscles that help you breathe as well are also somewhat paralyzed. And that gives the sensation that there's something sitting on your chest. It's called a hallucination or an experience. And even the other experience that Blanche describes of someone being in the room, an ugly monster, that's a very classical description. And it varies between people. Some people say it's like a house help is dusting the bed next to her. To the other extreme, a monster, or in some cases people say they were abducted by aliens. And in fact, a lot of these stories of people saying they've been abducted by aliens overnight have been episodes of sleep paralysis. And that's a classical presentation as well. So what Blanche describes is this sleep paralysis because the body is still disconnected from her brain, and she's still sort of in the middle of maybe a dream state, but she's sort of semi-awake and she cannot move.
Now, Blanche, you said you're self-diagnosed, meaning Mr. Google came through for you. And of course, you thought, coming from a church background, that you were dealing with demons or whatever else you had been told about. So at what point did you realize or put two and two together?
A friend of mine and also my sister, I remember we were sitting at her shop and a friend came running to our shop and was like, I don't know what just happened to me. I was sleeping and I felt like somebody was sitting on me. I thought it was my sister, but when I woke up, there was no one. So he just shot out of the house and came to us. My sister has the same story. It happened to her when she was in high school. She ditched preps and went to sleep in the dorm, so she got attacked by it and thought that maybe it's the same demon hunting. So from there I came to I was going on Facebook and I came across this post whereby it was saying, have you ever gone through this, they called it kashetani, called sleep paralysis, and the illustration, that picture is what like I see at night, that human figure. So I got interested, went on YouTube, looked through, and actually my symptoms or what I experienced matched what was being explained there. So then I just knew it is sleep paralysis.
Okay, so at least this morning tunajua si kashetani, as the doctor is saying, it's actually a neurological disorder. And Daktari, as you've heard her mention, the sister also experienced the same thing. So are sleep disorders are they genetically inclined, or it could be as a result of environmental factors?
It's a combination of the two, and it depends on what kind of sleep disorder we're talking about. So, for example, sleep paralysis, it can run in families, but that's not necessary. And in fact, a lot of these experiences that happen in sleep that are abnormal. So, for example, there's a patient who's going to come on talking about parasomnia, which we'll talk about in a minute. They can be triggered by changes in your environment or your lifestyle. And you may have normal sleep all through, but other things may happen. So, for example, you start taking too much alcohol, or you're sleep deprived because you're revising for exams, or you've gone through a stressful period in your life, such as a bereavement, and your sleep gets affected. And this can sometimes bring out these experiences. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a continuous disorder. There may be a trigger behind it.
Okay, now let's understand the other sleep disorders. Let's bring in Janice Nyokabi, who actually lives with parasomnia. But before we get to hear her story, if we have those graphics now, would like to just put out there the common types of parasomnia. And they actually include something that most of us have dealt with: sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep-related groaning, nightmares, night terrors, bedwetting, confusional arousal, teeth grinding, sleep-related eating disorder, and as Dr. was saying, the rapid eye movement sleep behavior disorder. Now, there is also another list of the less common types. Now it gets more interesting. The sleep texting, sexsomnia, exploding head syndrome, sleep-related hallucinations, sleep-related scratching, and even sleep driving, which definitely is a very dangerous form of sleepwalking. And I'd like to hear from Janice. Which one do you deal with?
Hello, Gladys. Thank you so much for this opportunity. As mentioned, I'm Janice Nyokabi, in my 30s. For me, I suffer from nightmares. I have repetitive nightmares, which have been happening for the longest time possible. My earliest recollection was in high school. I used to sleep on the upper decker. So that particular dream, I still recall it to date. There was a guy lying on the next bed, just looking at me like this. So of course, as a girl in a boarding school, you'll be pretty scared. So I had to run for my life. Unfortunately, I landed on my iron box and hurt my eye really bad. So that was that's the first recollection of the nightmares I've had over time.
Okay, and how often does it happen?
For quite some time, since maybe since high school, but the best recollections, maybe 2007, prior to 2007, they were very constant. Till recently, when I started seeing Dr. Soki, they've been very constant, like on a daily basis. It became a thing. So it was just like part of me.
And when you talk about the nightmares, is it the same story? Do you still see the same guy on the bed checking you out while asleep, or does the storyline change?
It doesn't change, and if it does, it's slightly, but it's always guys or a guy coming through my bedroom window. And they're out to abuse me. They have sticks. Just very weird, but it's the same dream, like almost all the time. And I can actually recall, because I've shared it with my friends for quite a number of times. Yeah, it's almost the same. It's just the same nightmare over and over and over again.
Okay, from your recollection, what's the worst it has ever got to?
Apart from the one for high school where I got hurt because I had to jump from my bed to the floor. For the rest, I get to injure myself once in a while. I hurt my knees when I'm trying to like run away. Then I lose sleep. So it means if I get a nightmare, okay, I might get to bed at around 10:30 p.m. That's quite early. Then the next thing I have a nightmare. By the time I wake up out of it and I look at the clock, it's only like 10:50. So I've had a nightmare within the first 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So definitely I'm so anxious now I can't get back to sleep. But the element of getting hurt in the process of running away is part of the most annoying thing.
And trying to explain what you go through to perhaps your colleagues in school, your family members, how was that taken?
I know for my closest colleague who we worked with for like 5 years, I'd share with her the dreams. So we'd make fun about it, about the stunts at pool. Because maybe I'd be ducking from the so-called enemy, or I'd go draw the curtains, because I think lighting gives me comfort. But now when you mention to other people, they're like, I think you're jinxed. You should pray about it because it's going to happen. And that's very scary. When somebody tells you you're going to be abused because of your dreams, it really gives you a lot of anxiety. So for sometimes sharing it with just random people was a no-no for me. When I talk about it with my mom, she'd be like, probably you have something in the house that is not good. People, how our moms talk. Okay, obviously they do care about us. So I go through my things and I'm wondering, was this present genuine? Should I discard this? Should I move out from this house? Yeah, and such stuff.
Okay, and it's interesting that some things that we think are normal, clearly, are someone else's daily reality. Parasomnia, what's the science behind it, Daktari?
So this is an example of a non-REM parasomnia. So parasomnia means abnormal sleep, or an abnormal intrusion in your sleep. And what happens there is that the transition from being wakeful to going into deep sleep and back up again is disrupted for some reason. And there can be many reasons for that disruption. Either, again, you didn't sleep well, you didn't eat well, or it's something that you're now just born with. And as you gave the list of examples of how it can be, in non-REM parasomnias, like Janice's, you still have the ability to use your body. And it's either you're acting out your dreams or you're acting out the experience that you're feeling. So there's this repetitive, some people can say persecutory or very paranoid kind of state that you enter, that someone is after you or someone's out to get you or abuse you, and you react accordingly. And in some cases, because of that disruption, you're reacting to that, and you can still use your body to do so. And there have been examples of where people have arisen from their non-REM sleep in that sense and done very complex things. Attacked the person next to them if they have a bed partner, climbed out of the window, gone driving. And it's yes, it is a scary experience. The science behind it is rather complicated, but we do know that it does exist. As Janice describes, her non-REM parasomnia, this nightmare kind of state, happens early on in the night, which is when non-REM is more predominant, as opposed to REM sleep disorders that happen much later on in the night or early morning, when you're more likely to be in a longer REM period.
And Janice, I'd like to know, when you take probably a nap during the day, do you get the nightmares?
Hardly. I don't get the nightmares, but I've suffered from sleep paralysis, the devil's hug, quite a number of times. As my earlier colleague mentioned about, you feel like somebody is sitting on you. And it's funny how everybody calls on Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I think it only takes a few seconds, but you feel like you really paralyzed. You're not in control of your body at all. So that happens during daytime, but not nighttime. I hardly have nightmares during the during the day.
Okay, and Dr. has mentioned something about you literally acting out, and as you're saying, you've gotten even hurt, trying to run away from whatever it is that you're having a nightmare about. Has that affected probably your dating scene?
Yes, definitely it has. So I think for viewers who are watching, if you have partners who suffer from any type of parasomnia, probably patience and maybe seeing a specialist together so that you get to understand that somebody is not like jinxed or possessed with demons would be a good thing. But it does affect your dating life.
Okay, and still on the dating matter, could you probably, now that they're the only ones who've ever seen you act it out in your full, when you're in it, what did they describe? What were you going through and what happened?
Maybe the closest person who has been able to describe what I go through would be my mother.
Okay.
For the moments we've spent holidays together, she described me talking in my sleep, a lot of movement, then I'll scream. I think that's the only way to come out of that nightmare, because I have to scream. So I guess even my neighbors probably think I'm battered. I'm battered by a spouse or something, because I'm sure they've really had me scream a number of times. It's only that maybe they've probably not thought of telling me. But from experiences, I know my sleep it's not, you see the people say you sleep like a baby. For me, I don't think I sleep like a baby. There's a lot of movement, maybe me running away, trying to wake up from the nightmare and everything.
Okay, and speaking about the effects it has on you, I'm imagining when you have the nightmare just before you fall asleep, you probably will not sleep well through the night and you have work the next day. What is the impact on your social life and work life?
Since I joined the corporate world, I've had a very busy schedule. So every evening when I think about going to sleep, of course, I get this anxiety that the nightmare is going to come within the first 20 minutes. So at times, I wouldn't tell you if it's going to be real or not real, because you actually don't know what's happening before you seek guidance from a specialist. So around 2 years ago, I had to make a move from the old house, because at that point I believed that house was really possessed. New bed. I got a divan bed. That way I didn't have to like peep under the bed every time I'm going to sleep. So that gave me a bit of comfort. But as soon as I moved, the nightmares came back. It was life as usual. So to some extent, I really believed I'd been possessed. So at some point, going to work was just tiresome, because you wake up in the morning, you're so tired. I'm supposed to leave the house at 6. I only got sleep at around 4 a.m. And I have to be in the office at 7. So during the day, I'm so tired. So what I did, I got myself a small cushion and a massage blanket. So lunchtime, once in a while, I'd go get a power nap. So that would take me through the day. because otherwise driving home would be difficult. Because now you're drowsy behind the wheel, and it wasn't such a good thing.
Okay, now Dr. She mentions at times she gets the sleep paralysis. So are we saying some of the sleep disorders can actually be combined?
That is correct, and there is an overlap with some of these disorders, and that can be expected. For example, if you go back to Blanche, who I've not met before, but the story is quite interesting. The fact that she, at a young age, was going to have an afternoon nap, that already makes you think, why is someone of that age going in to have an afternoon nap? And that the next thing she remembers is this sleep paralysis experience. And sleep paralysis can be a part of a larger diagnosis, the commonest one being narcolepsy. And I know you have someone who's going to talk about their experience with narcolepsy. And narcolepsy is classically has a number of sleep-related problems, experiences put together, one of which is sleep paralysis. But the other one of which is this daytime sleepiness, where people just don't realize that they needed sleep, but wake up and found that they had napped for 20 minutes. And during that time, they may have these other sleep experiences too. So yes, there can be an overlap, or they belong to a larger group of disorders or disease.
And for you, Janice, any other family member who's ever experienced this?
Nobody in my family has mentioned this.
Okay.
Yes,
all right. Now, let's understand narcolepsy, as you've had Daktari talk about. If we have those graphics on, do we have graphics on the same narcolepsy? Yes. This is characterized by extreme sleepiness during the day and falling asleep suddenly during the day. And as we mentioned, we have somebody who lives with the same Marianne Jagona. Thank you for joining us. And when do you recollect ever discovering something was a little bit off?
Yes. Good morning, Janet and Daktari. The first time I experienced, I was in Form 1, the early admission. So at first I thought it was because of the change of sleep schedule from the migration from doing KCP and then the time in between so that I can join high school, because I used to I didn't have like a clean sleep schedule. But now what was not right about the sleep, I used to wake up very tired, and then immediately after I woke up, I used to 5 minutes or 10 minutes later, I will start dozing when I'm brushing my teeth, when I'm taking breakfast. On my way to school, I was actually walking while sleeping, as in not sleepwalking, but the other way around. I'm headed somewhere, and then there's the sleep. I fall asleep while walking, and then also while taking notes. I remember there was at a basketball league, I fell asleep while playing basketball, which was not right. And then also my parents noted that I used to fall asleep now while eating. We are at the table eating, and then I start dozing off. So that was the first experiences with narcolepsy.
Wow. So 14 years old, you realize something was off, and everyone is in wow as to how can you be playing basketball and then you fall asleep? As in, exactly what is it that you feel?
First, I feel like I'm tired, and then I have heavy eyes. People will tell me that I have lazy eyes. Actually, it's when now I'm about to fall asleep. Now looking back now, so the tiredness. At first, I could have that burst of energy. I can do when I want to do something. Like now, for instance, during that particular basketball league, I was prepped up, everything, and then now, because even the period of playing, now I fell asleep on the court.
Okay.
And then I ended up falling, and then I got hurt on my elbow.
So wait.
And then nikaambiwa nitoke.
Okay, wait. So you were standing, actually playing, alafu ukalala, ukazima.
See, as in kuzima, kuna hiyo confusion, like nitakuwa like in terms of there's a confusion. I normally get disoriented. Yes, that's the perfect word to use. So before then, someone knocked me over and fell. I remember it was at, I think, Mangu. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so now, when did you get diagnosed? When did you find out that this was actually narcolepsy?
Wow, that was quite a journey, because from Form 1, I remember we used to go like, when my mom saw that this was very unusual, that's when we started seeking treatment. So all throughout high school, I remember I was in and out of hospital. Even some doctors told me that I was faking my symptoms, because I was healthy according to them. The blood test, hemoglobin levels were high, because I was also put on iron deficiency treatment, so to combat the fatigue or the sleepiness during the day, but it did not work. So throughout high school, I struggled, even taking notes. I did not have notes. While reading induces the sleep for me. So, and after high school, that's when I got diagnosed, and it was because a psychiatrist was able to direct me to Kenyatta National Hospital, Department of Mental Health, to go and get checked. Because the other times I was turned away at Casualty in Kenyatta. When the general practitioner looks at me, takes the test, they see that I'm healthy. So they used to think that the time I spend going to the hospital was like an escaping factor for me, because I was missing studies on purpose. So that's when I was diagnosed in Kenyatta, 5 years down the line.
Okay. Are you currently on medication? Were you put on any medication?
Yes, initially I was put on medication, but I was able, of which it was quite expensive. They are not pocket friendly. And then 6 months down the line, the medication went off stock around the country. So I was unable to continue with the medication, but when it came back, I had reverted back to how I used to survive before getting diagnosed, because the medication gave me some severe side effects with my digestive system, whereby I developed some gastric effects. I became sensitive to some food. So I chose now adjusting my lifestyle.
Okay, and you'll tell us more about how you adjusted your lifestyle. Now, Daktari, listening to this sounds mind-boggling, but you're the guy with the sense. Help us out.
So that's a very interesting story about narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is it's a rare disorder, but it does exist, and it is genetic, and there are some tests you can do to confirm it. So if you measure some levels of these chemicals in the spinal fluid, they're abnormal, and that's what the condition is due to. And it classically gives you this overwhelming desire to sleep at any time, even at odd times and places, such as, for example, sitting and eating, and you fall asleep. And there's sometimes that desire is not there. You just fall asleep, and you wake up sometime later to find that you've fallen asleep. And it's not unusual to hear the story we just heard, that you're labeled as a lazy child or someone who's who's just not interested in school. But there are many red flags that should be picked up along the way. For example, just as we've heard, sleeping in unusual circumstances, such as playing basketball, I mean, why would that happen? Someone who's saying that they've slept 7-8 hours yet wake up in the morning and feel completely unrefreshed, that suggests that the sleep has been disrupted overnight and they haven't had a good sleep. And narcolepsy does have these other clues too. So, for example, sleep paralysis can occur, and if they describe the same experiences that the previous people have described to us of someone sitting on their chest, they can't move their body when they're in the middle of the night, that should make you think about, does this belong to this larger group of conditions called narcolepsy? But the majority of people with narcolepsy just have the sleepiness, the daytime sleepiness, and this overwhelming desire to sleep. The other interesting experience that people with narcolepsy get is this condition called cataplexy. So cataplexy is where the body just suddenly loses tone and you fall. If you Google cataplexy and bowling, there's a nice video of a person, I think in Canada, who has narcolepsy, and he's bowling in a bowling alley, and he's going to go for a straight 10. And because of the excitement as he bowls, he just falls flat onto the floor. But he doesn't lose consciousness. His body just loses tone, and that's called cataplexy. And I do wonder whether one of the experiences that our previous speaker just talked about, for example, in the basketball, the excitement or the the adrenaline rush of playing just made cataplexy happen, but they didn't fall asleep. Yeah, they just lose body tone. Sometimes it's not as dramatic. You can get cataplexy that's much more subtle. So, for example, when they're about to hit the punchline of a joke, they start stammering and they can't hit the joke. Or when they're in an emotional situation, usually positive emotion, so lots of laughter, but sometimes negative emotion, such as in a bereavement situation and they're crying, it could just be as subtle as their head just starts bobbing a bit as they're crying because their muscle tone has reduced in the neck. So these are subtle clues that do tell us that there may be something else going on. And yes, it is due to a disorder from the makeup of the fluid around the spine and a genetic cause.
And all this is in the brain, a lot of it.
It's interesting you say about the brain. So the whole architecture of our sleep, is actually down to the cellular level. All our cells in the body go to sleep and wake up. And this has only been recently described. In fact, the Nobel Prize for it was only awarded in 2017 when they demonstrated all of this. And there's a chemical called adenosine that accumulates in your body throughout the time that you're awake. And when it reaches a critical period, then you feel like you need to sleep. It switches something inside the brain as the chemical increases. If you want the technical term, the actual part is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it's in the deep part of the brain, and that's what regulates the sleep-wake cycle. And as the adenosine goes up, it switches and says you probably need to sleep, and that's when you fall asleep. Now for us, we know that this peak of adenosine does happen towards the end of the day, but it also happens sometime halfway through the day. So at around 2-3 o'clock, it has peaked, and that's why some of us, we struggle in the afternoon to get through that afternoon work or clinic. And it's not because of a heavy lunch, although that can be a cause, but because it is that adenosine that's gone up. And some of us then always need a pick-me-up afterwards. You need to have a chocolate or a coffee at lunchtime to keep you going. But the body's natural tendency is that it feels like it needs to get rid of this adenosine by wanting to go to sleep. And our day-to-day life right now doesn't allow us to do so. But certainly, it's the other way around too. When you go to sleep, by the time you reach the morning, the adenosine levels have now gone to rock bottom. So now that's the other opposite switch. It tells the body it's now time to wake up. Yes.
Okay, so for those with sleep disorders, that regulation is not normal.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. When we come back, we'll hear more from Blanche, Janice, and of course, Marianne on their experiences with sleep disorders. But before we take the break, we asked you earlier, do you live with or do you know someone who suffers from a sleep disorder? What challenges do you face? Hashtag new normal. And we have Eva Morish who says, kindly, I'm in that situation until I have ulcers. Which medicine can I use? Ever, please let us know which of the sleep disorders you're dealing with. Aisha Jerry says, I suffer from sleep paralysis and I'm afraid to visit a doctor. Aisha, it is a normal, abnormal occurrence. So that's why there's a doctor for it. Jones Jedida says, pia mimi nimekuwa nikiota since nikiwa mdogo, sometimes naeza tembea kiasi ndio niamke. How do I get some help? This is sleepwalking. Wamurango Jr. says, this is my current situation. Please let us know which of the sleep disorders you live with. Susan says, so huwa ni inatibika? Yes, there is treatment and management for sleep disorders. Kagiri George says, myself, sleep paralysis is an everyday dose. If I happen to sleep past waking time, I'm sure of an attack. Interesting perspective. When we come back, Daktari, I'd like you to speak on that. Karemi says, I used to have sleep paralysis like nearly every night. I found out not sleeping on my back helped. Weird. Karemi, you actually could be onto something, and Daktari will be talking more about that. Godfrey says, I do sleepwalk and talk. I remember while still in high school, I dreamt and acted my role of Paulina of coming to Bath set book. I literally did everything she did. I got lost at a railway station and sat on my iron box. Thank God someone saw me under a tree. Godfrey continues, I again dreamt having been done with school. I packed everything and rolled my mattress. I was woken up by the gate man as he shouted at me. Wow. And he continues to say, the number of times I dreamt while at home are many, but not of late. I only a bit of sleep talking when I've had a tough day. Wow. This is interesting. Kimani says, I used to sleepwalk when I was 10 years old. I remember being told to get to sleep early so that they can hide the keys, but that stopped. I still sleep talk till now, and I love it that way, actually. When I'm told that I sleep talked, I usually want to know the details. Kimani, that's an interesting perspective. Talk about looking at the glass being half full. And Sleep Smart Kenya says, I actually live with narcolepsy. I hope you have seen a doctor for the same, and if not, let us know how you manage this condition. Well, a lot of you speaking to us about the experiences with sleep disorders. Talk to us, #NewNormal. We'll be right back.
Rock Industries Limited wanakuletea bidhaa za plastiki zinazotumika kila siku maishani, kuanzia matumizi ya jikoni, usafi na shuleni, miongoni mwa matumizi mengine. Chakula kitamu sio upishi tu, kikiwa kitamu kisha kipakuliwe katika vyombo maridadi kinakuwa kitamu zaidi. Ndio maana Rock Industries Limited wanahakikisha mezani na jikoni kunapendeza kwa kukuletea vyombo maridadi vya plastiki. Vyombo hivi ni vya viwango vya juu, vyenye rangi nzuri ya kupendeza, umbo wa kuvutia na vinadumu. Baadhi ya bidhaa za plastiki kutoka Rock Industries Limited ni vikombe, glasi, sahani, jagi, begi, bakuli, vijiko, vichana na kadhalika. Na bidhaa hizi muhimu zinapatikana katika duka lililo karibu nawe pamoja na maduka ya jumla kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana na Rock Industries Limited kupitia nambari 0722575619 au 0736028181.
Jiko Koa, Kenya's highest saving, longest lasting and biggest Jiko, cooks fast using half the charcoal compared to other Jikos, so you use less fuel and receive extra savings. Enjoy our great discounts and save an extra 500 Kenya shillings when you buy Jiko Koa at your nearest shopping outlet.
The Nation Media Group 254 Realty and Homes Expo is back, discussing property investment and home ownership. Join us on 27th and 28th November 2020 at the Sarit Center Expo Center as we engage with property developers and investors, financiers, contractors, insurers, roofing solution providers, ceramic and interior designers, land dealers, and investment solution providers, among others. To sponsor, exhibit, and for inquiries, please contact 0721-678-597 or email property@ke.nationmedia.com.
Huyo jamaa unaangalia hapo unamdespise atiana form. Hey, shida. Mungu halali, kuna day utapatana na yeye ameomoka mbaya. Gari ni ile nono na life inamwendea fiti na wewe umechapa. Mako. Do hivi, jisort na umori, mjenge life. Usije ukaregret maze.
To get Jisort na Morio by Vuma, dial *811 *930#. Skiza na Nation.
Every spoonful of Nutri comes loaded with the necessary vitamins, protein and minerals for you and your family to become healthier and stronger. Pick up a pack today from your nearest store. Nutri, every spoonful counts.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today we are talking about sleep disorders, and oh my, the information over here is a lot, and a lot of questions coming from you, and also saying that I have been living with this. I did not even know there is treatment and management for the same. Now, speaking of which, Blanche, you say that you self-diagnosed, meaning you've never seen a doctor. Why?
I've never gotten a chance to see a doctor, and again, I guess it's the environment whereby also the influence. You see, when you talk to someone and then they tell you that maybe it's demon or ghost hunting, you tend to believe because they tend to look the same, or rather what they describe is similar. So for me, it's maybe the chance and what people say, the ones that I shared with, I think I was satisfied with that, and now I'm just living with it.
Okay, and when you say you've never had a chance, is it because you did not know there's a doctor who actually treats sleep disorders?
Partly, and also, I guess I was too busy, from school. Now you're out here hustling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And again, with your family members, having understood what it is you live with, none has ever said probably go see a psychiatrist or psychologist?
I guess it's because they don't know. And again, we usually laugh about it because now that I remember my mom and my small sister, and now my older sister, I guess we are 4, have probably experienced the same. So it doesn't hurt, it doesn't harm, except the fear. With time, I've gotten to control my fear during that attack. So it's never much. You just get attacked, released, and you're good to go.
So for you, there is the comfort in numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear you. Now, Janice, it took a while before you got a diagnosis. Why did it take so long?
I'll take you back to the period after high school. As you may know, when you're in high school, you hardly spend so much time with your parents because I was in a boarding school. So during my college years, I used to have a lot of nightmares. So my mom kept coming to my room to calm me down. So at some point she spoke to a friend who referred me to an ENT specialist because I had so many other issues, anger, irritability, or just a ball full of very funny emotions. So I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I had a surgery. So since 2007 to date, I'd always assumed my nightmares are because of maybe my thyroid disorder. So come like 3 years ago, I started mentioning to my endocrinologist. I kept telling her, these nightmares are becoming too many. So I'm constantly tired. So at first she recommended we could maybe do an MRI. So I went to book my appointment, but then there was a long queue. So I gave up on it and I forgot about it. A few months later, I complained about my nightmares. She referred me to Dr. Suki. Then I was like, a neurologist, couldn't I have an issue with my brain? No, I ignored it. Then sometime after COVID, I think it was around March, April this year. So we spoke about the whole thing again. Then she was like, you never went to see Dr. Suki? I was like, no, I never went. She was like, let me give you another referral, you go see him. So I gathered the courage, went and booked an appointment because she was like, she was very sure it wasn't about the thyroid disorder that I have. So once I met Dr. Asuki and we had a chat about it, for once in my life, I had this person who could fully relate about what I was going through. So that's when I got aware of what was happening. At least I felt I wasn't possessed. So there was no more anxiety. There's no more anxiety when I'm headed to sleep. Maybe once in a while there is, but I know it's just a brain dysfunction which can be sorted out. And so right now I'm so comfortable about it. I'm at a better place than the past 30 years of my life.
All right. So are you saying you're on medication?
Yes, I'm on medication now.
Okay, Marianne. Yes. Marianne, you said after you saw the psychiatrist, that was it. You took the medication, you couldn't sustain it, and you have just been managing it on your own. What do you mean by managing it?
Yes, before I discontinued with my clinic, the doctor assisted me on how to make alert decisions while I'm awake. So the recommendation that they gave me, it's what I've been using ever since. So in terms of managing it, first I can say a support system. At least now we knew the condition I had, we had a name for it. And the doctors had counseled me, also with my mom who walked with me through the journey. And then in terms of house chores, I'm assisted a lot. Even when I used to work at an office, the support system, it came to a place where I was able to speak to the management, and then I was allowed to now educate my fellow colleagues, of whom they were supportive. Whenever they used to sleep, they will just let me, and then I will help me catch up on what I have missed. And then, as I said, reading induces sleep. So these days, I at least we have ebooks. So, or in my phone, I've enabled touch to speak. So, listening is much more advantageous than reading through. And then scheduled naps also assist a lot. So maybe if I'm working, I can take a nap when I feel like I'm about to fall asleep, because now at least there are those, like, I can tell when sometimes at times I can tell when I'm about to fall asleep. Sometimes the sleep just comes, I realize after I'm awake. Now, the hard part to control is the cataplexy bit, and also, like the earlier colleague spoke about now, hallucination and stuff. I also have that on narcolepsy, what we call hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucination that way. Normally, I can hear someone call my name, so that I cannot control when I'm about to fall asleep. Or, narcolepsy is funny. I can fall asleep or struggle with feeling asleep. So the urge of sleep, I feel the urge to sleep, but I cannot fall asleep. So I end up doing what it's normally termed to micro sleep. Either writing or maybe in the middle of conversation, what are you talking about? And then I'm battery low. I go back. Either I take a nap immediately because now someone because sometimes I'm alert, sometimes I'm not alert.
Oh, so you're talking to somebody and then you just start falling asleep and start speaking gibberish.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. We'll come back to you because narcolepsy sounds quite complex, but back to the doctor. There seems to be a lot of fear of misdiagnosis, but also people who believe that these are not things you go to see a doctor for. Please talk about this.
I think it's an interesting point. And if you just go through the what's been described, neurological conditions, so brain conditions, generally are not very well understood. And I think partly maybe the doctors and physicians are to blame. Let's take a very common disorder, epilepsy, seizures. I mean, even up till this day, not just in Kenya, but countries across the world still think that it's because of demonic possession or you've been cursed, etc., etc. And yet we know that it's a standard brain disorder that requires treatment and you can get better. And I think the onus is certainly upon us to help educate the public, certainly also the clinicians, healthcare workers about these disorders existing. I must congratulate Marianne on a number of accounts. Number one, that they actually do have a patient support group about this, and they've put themselves together. I know they even presented themselves at the Rare Disorders Group meeting last year. But who do these people turn to? It's not any one particular person. Yes, you can see a neurologist, but there's only a handful of us. Sleep disorders are so many, and indeed this too much sleepiness, not sleeping enough, can be assessed certainly at a baseline level by any doctor to say, well, is there a problem with sleep occurring here? And then they can refer on. One thing that I should mention is that these descriptions that have been given they're quite unique, they're quite dramatic, and they're quite interesting to learn, but still on the face of it are quite rare. The commonest sleep problems that we do see nowadays are those people who complain of not having enough sleep. They wake up tired. And usually the cause for that is something much more straightforward. So for example, just as Janice said, the first thing we do is rule out basic body diseases like, is it a thyroid dysfunction? Are they diabetic? That's one of the things. The second thing is, how is this person sleeping? And with the movement of humans to urban centers with this, almost 24/7 work cycle, especially in places like Nairobi and other places in the world that like to have this, the city that never sleeps. Sleep disruption it's becoming the norm. And usually people who complain of not sleeping enough are those who are not doing the right things to go to sleep properly. And that's another whole element called sleep hygiene, which is important. So I think just going back to what you're saying, I think it is important that not only people around us, but doctors as well acknowledge that sleep disorders do exist in various guises and who to refer on to.
Okay. Now, let's get back to Marianne. You mentioned that you are a mother, and that should have been, or maybe was, an interesting experience for you. Tell us about the instances of narcolepsy when pregnant.
Wow. Being extremely tired, when you're pregnant, you also get fatigue, and narcolepsy is like it brings out the fatigueness in it. So mostly falling asleep, and then also when the baby started kicking, it used to trigger cataplexy. So when the baby used to kick, I used to the doctor had said, and my cataplexy also reaches makes my knees backward. So from my neck to my knees, I almost fell down, but it never did. Not until during childbirth, where now I was experiencing contractions. Each contraction, when they started off mild, I got mild the attacks, but when it continued to grow to more severe now contraction, it put me to full-blown cataplexy, whereby I was unable to move. So I had to lie down on the bed, which is against what normally people are told to walk around so that the baby can. So I had to lie down all through the process because one, I was alone in the labor ward because nurses came only to check in when I rang the bell, of which I didn't know. I never had someone else who have narcolepsy and had the similar experience. So it was a tough lesson, a painful one, a painful experience, but at least I got to live to tell the story. So I went all in all, the childbirth was assisted, and then
Okay. Let me take you back to the childbirth. So you're saying every time you'd get a contraction, you'd get cataplexy. So you would go, you'd have paralysis. So when you say assisted birth, does that mean you had a normal birth or a natural birth, or you had to do a CS?
It was natural, but now the midwife helped me to push.
Oh wow!
So, even then, they didn't know what was going on, because every time I was told to push, my body went numb. I was aware of what I was going through, but I was unable to push completely.
Interesting, Doctor. Have you ever come across such a case?
I must say that is quite unique, and it's quite an experience to go through. And someone like Marianne, who was initially on treatment, got a bit better, but then couldn't find the drugs or have access to them, has clearly now tried to adopt their life around their symptoms. But there's some things that you can't change. So, for example, the pain of labor and the contractions, yes, that can trigger cataplexy attacks to happen. But it's only if people realize that that's what's happening, then you know what needs to be done. And someone like Marianne, who despite having a house help, people to help her around her, and she's still getting significant episodes in her life, leaving the gas cooker on and she's fallen asleep. I mean, that's a risk. What would happen if she's driving a car and something happens there too? And in such people, treatment should be available, and that's why I strongly support that they have patient groups, because there's not only comfort in numbers, but there's strength in numbers too. And the more people who come together, the more you can lobby to say, well, this needs to be recognized and support needs to be provided to allow these drugs to be available for such people as Marianne.
Okay, now ladies, I'd like to understand, a lot of what you live with feels like you need supervision most often than not. For you, Janice, before you left your mother's house, was there a pull and tag as to will you survive on your own?
I must say, I was initially scared. I was very scared. So part of my evening routine was to go through all the rooms in the house and make sure they are under lock and key, confirm there's nobody under my bed, then get to sleep. So that was one of my survival tactics. And since I moved from my mom's house, I think I'm in my third house now. But now that I know everything is going to be okay, I don't see myself moving again. But it was a tough period. I was initially scared. I was more scared of the nightmares more than the bills.
But you talked about hurting yourself when you have the nightmare episodes. Did you feel the need to probably have somebody watch over you in case this happened?
I was embarrassed. I found it really embarrassing, and the fact that most of my friends wouldn't understand. Why would you want me to live with you just because of nightmares? Just pray about it, listen to nice Christian songs, have a Bible under your pillow. So for me, it was more of embarrassment. So I thought I could just survive. It became a part of life as much as it was like really, really draining me.
Now, you could easily have decided to stay on and live with your mom, but you moved out. Perhaps was that a way of proving to yourself that you can make it on your own?
I felt that I came to a time that I needed to like grow myself. And also due to the fatigue, my office was in Westlands and I was coming from Gong. So I was constantly tired, having to leave the house at around 5:30 to make it to Westlands by 8 a.m., then go back home. So I was in constant fatigue. So it was really important for me to move to some place near work. So that was my major reason for moving out from my mom's house.
Blanche, you're still young and at some point you will think about being independent. Do you feel the need to hang around your family members who understand you, or at one point do you feel you will need to actually spread your wings?
Yeah, at a point I'll feel like I'll need to move out, but also having them around is quite something nice because they understand me. I also have, I'm quite a sleeper, so maybe being alone and sleeping all the time, maybe during my working hours, people might not understand. So that comfort from the family, people who understand you and let you be you, it's quite something nice.
And for Marianne, you talked about being conscious of the times where the narcolepsy, let's call them attacks, are about to happen. And you talked about things like perhaps cooking, and the last thing you remember is the food on the stove and such like things. What are some of these other experiences?
Well, one of the other most extreme episode, I was coming from work. And then, like I mentioned, sometimes if I don't take the scheduled naps, of which I didn't know then, sleep can happen when I'm going home. So I was in college. I remember I walked through bus station and I fell asleep while walking, and then only to be woken up by zile matatu za Giburai, unakumbuka venye zilikuwa zinaenda. So one hooted, I actually only walked through the road without like looking left or right. So I was woken up by a speeding, hooting matatu. I remember that experience. I went home crying. I was angry at my mom for some for some reason, and like Dr. said, emotions trigger Cataplexy. So you find. I was scared. I was angry, and the only person who could understand me then was my mom. So I was unable to like express myself fully of what happened. So my mom told me to relax, go take a nap, and then when you come down, come and tell me what happened, because that was like a near-death experience. So that caused me to have like a clear sleep nap schedule. Or when maybe in a matatu, I normally tend to sleep, because I usually say if that is my credit for like it will keep me awake for several minutes or wherever I'm going. So I describe like safe spaces where I can take a nap. If I'm at the office and I get that overwhelming urge to sleep, I just push my laptop aside and then take a nap. And then if I'm at home, I normally take a nap, like now a clean scheduled nap. In terms of caring of my daughter, my husband was is very supportive, even my parents whenever he's not around, and then we share chores. So when I'm awake and alert, I can usually do the cleaning, the more tedious work, and then take a nap, and then afterwards, and then if it's something regarding cooking, if I feel any sort of fatigue, I tell someone to take over. So it's more about discipline, having a discipline schedule that I adhere to.
Okay, interesting how you have learned to live with this condition. We take another short break on Your World, and when we come back, more on sleep disorders. Do we have some feedback for this time? Okay, then remember the question to you: do you suffer, or do you know anyone who suffers from any sleep disorder? Ben says, don't remind me that. A friend of mine died through that dream when he was told, Wezi wameiba vitu. He woke up and ran chasing ghost thieves while still sleeping. He did not come back alive. Wow. Pole sana Ben. Edwin says, I experienced excessive daytime sleepiness, sleep paralysis, and sleepwalking since I was 14. Edwin, I wonder if you've seen a doctor for the same. Steve Austin says, mental health is very important. Let's not ignore it. Sleep disorder can be attributed to stress as well. And yes, we'll be talking about that in a moment. Cosman says, what causes one to sleepwalk? Well, Daktari will tell us in a moment. Steve Austin says, thanks, Blanche, for showing courage and sharing your experience. A great session. Steve, thank you for watching. Sharon says, if someone wakes my niece who is 5 years old to go and susu, go to the washroom, she behaves funny. She may shout or look frightened. Is that a sleep disorder? Daktari, is it?
That's an abnormal arousal. You're waking someone up from their sleep cycle. They're going to wake up confused because they haven't finished the cycle. So that's not a disorder. She's actually being provoked to become abnormal. It's a confusional arousal.
So it's a normal.
Well, if you let her sleep,
if
you let her sleep, she'll be fine. But you're waking her up at an abnormal time, and therefore that's the way she reacts.
And that would happen to anyone.
It could happen to anyone, yes. Yeah, that's why adjusting how you sleep and when you sleep can sometimes get rid of all these disorders for you, or some of the disorders. Yeah.
Okay, so the doctor says it is recommended to be on medication to actually treat and manage sleep disorders, but there are other things that you need to take up to also cater for the same. He calls them sleep hygiene mechanisms, but also other things that you can take on that would help you out with the same. When we come back, we find out which ones.
Wanasherehekea miaka 20 na wewe. Piga star 444 star 20 tumia shilingi 20 pekee utunukiwe 20 minutes na 20 MB.
I heard about the Equity Wings to Fly program. I applied and I was able to get in. They paid for everything, literally everything that I needed. I'd like to start an initiative like the one Equity started here to sponsor students.
Oh my, oh my, oh my days. Life is wonderful. Life is wonderful. Life is wonderful. Never understood.
Golden rules for clear and smooth skin, brought to you by Mentholatum Acnes.
Acne C10 Serum contains 10% pure vitamin C that fades dark spots, clears skin freckles, and reduces wrinkles.
When it comes to pimple care, Acne's Creamy Wash contains multiple vitamins and removes excessive oil and dirt. Acne's Toner rejuvenates skin. Acne's Sealing Gel fights bacteria.
Ruiru Mabati Factory offers best quality Mabati at the most affordable prices. We pride in over 10 years experience. Our products have 15-year warranty and are KED certified. We manufacture box profile, Europe tile, Jenga tile, corrugated profile, among others in a wide variety of colors. Enjoy our free delivery in just 72 hours. To order, call us now on 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, Mali Safi kwa bei poa.
Finding meaningful stories takes more drive and passion.
Father's involvement in maternal and reproductive health is slowly becoming a game changer.
Getting to the truth takes more determination.
Hakuna. Nilikuwa kilio changu ni watoto wanapata shida chakula, lakini nimeona Kenya yetu watu wamenishika mkono.
Finding real solutions takes more understanding.
Shortage of teachers, lack of textbooks.
Afadhali mtoto awe chini ya miti badala ya awe na chupa ya glue kwa mapua.
And NTV investigates leads to impact.
This building here has got its fair share of criminals.
Who are these COVID billionaires?
Corruption related to PPE, it's actually a murder.
So these are patients with cerebral palsy.
From what I saw being aired in NTV, it really broke my heart.
NTV, stories that impact you.
Across Africa, countries are adjusting to a once-in-a-century health crisis. To unlock new opportunities, rediscover untapped value addition, accelerate development. Can we, as Africa, strengthen the resilience of business and increase the agility of the labor market? Can we harness the realities of the new norm to power partnerships across sectors, boost production, and deepen shared prosperity even to the most excluded? Nation Media Group brings you the second edition of the Kusi Ideas Festival. The theme, Towards a Post-COVID Africa, Recovering Together. The Kusi Ideas Festival, which is brought to you by the Nation Media Group and Kisumu County, will be on the 8th and 9th of December at Ciala Resort in Kisumu.
Every spoonful of Nutri comes loaded with the necessary vitamins, protein and minerals for you and your family to become healthier and stronger. Pick up a pack today from your nearest store. Nutri, every spoonful counts.
Thank you for staying with Your World. Our conversation this morning, sleep disorders. But before we get back to it, La Distillerie is a gastronomic restaurant in the heart of Luxembourg's forest. Its Michelin-starred chef, Rem Sleep, is tackling global warming and the pandemic by only cooking vegetarian dishes and, above all, using hyper-local produce. Every morning, Chef Sleep is out foraging in this Luxembourg forest. He says, with this, we're going to make a syrup with fir tree and holy leaves that will go and get lit. Now, this dried really tastes like vanilla and tonka bean. Now, flavors can be found in what most of us would not even consider as food. The Belgian cook has taken a somewhat radical approach this year by refusing to serve any animal product and adding a maximum of local ingredients to his menu. Elsewhere, 80-year-old sailor and journalist Jimmy Cornell starts his around-the-world tour from Seville to mark the 500th anniversary of Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan and Spanish sailor Juan Sebastian Elcano's expedition that resulted in the Earth's first circumnavigation. Cornell is completing his expedition aboard the Aventura Zero catamaran for the Challenge Elcano 500, a totally electric boat, and hopes to complete the journey in 9 months. Jimmy Cornell, journalist and sailor, says, as sailors, navigators, we know very well when we go out, we do not know when we return. But in principle, the route is about 60,000 kilometers. Now, around 150 London black cabs are being stored in a field outside the UK capital because of a lack of demand for fares in the latest COVID lockdown. They belong to one business, GB Taxi Services, which rents them out to drivers. Now, other companies are also storing hundreds of vehicles, saying their businesses are hanging by a thread.
Well, what you can see here behind us is basically storage of, the majority of our fleet of taxis, unfortunately, are not being rented at the moment by licensed drivers because there is no work for them in London. So our fleet at the moment is just sitting here doing nothing, and drivers are sitting at home without any work because of the current pandemic. We've had to stop the insurance on them. We've had to stop the road tax on them. We've had to take out the taxi meters and return them to the meter companies because they're on rental, just to try and keep, our costs down to a minimal. I think it's approximately 55 of the vehicles that are sitting here. The catalytic converters and the DPF filters have been stolen from underneath the vehicles. And I believe what they do with those is they, because they contain precious metals, these thieves then take them down to these metal recycling centres and cash in on them. But that's left us with an approximate damage cost to replace these units of around £120,000 at the moment. I couldn't tell you if we're confident to get through this at the moment. It is a struggle, and it's day by day now, not knowing what's going to happen. It's taken a massive impact on the business, and yes, to be quite frank with you, we are hanging on a thread, as many other businesses are, but also you have many other businesses who have had to totally fold,
Now, an Indian street dog that lost its front legs after being run over by a train has found a new home in Britain after enduring a year of therapy and learning to walk again with prosthetic limbs. The 3-year-old mutt was found covered in blood and her 4 legs badly injured by a Railway Protection Force constable at Faridabad in northern Haryana state last October. People for Animals India President Ravi Dubey said now the officer carried the wounded dog, now named Rocky, to one of PFA's shelters where she was rushed to a hospital. So time to actually put to bed, pun intended, this conversation on sleep disorders. And at this point, Dr. Ari, a lot of questions coming through to you. Let's start off with Steve Austin, who actually said, mental health is very important. Let's not ignore it. Sleep disorder can be attributed to stress as well. Maybe you can emphasize on some of the trigger points of sleep disorders.
I think that's a very important point. In fact, the majority of the people we see who come through to see us with sleep problems, the usual complaint is either they're sleeping too little or maybe sleeping too much. We've never seen a time like this before, the pandemic, and especially now, everyone is anxious about what's going to happen at work, what's going to happen tomorrow, I don't have a job, etc., and it's had such a huge impact on us psychologically. And one of the or certainly two of the most important conditions to think about when it comes to sleep disorders are anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. Anxiety is this state of where you're just always on edge, and in your body the chemicals change too, and that then itself can cause sleep disruption. So you may say that you go to bed at 10 o'clock at night physically, but you're just sitting in bed and your mind is racing through thoughts and you can't go to sleep. Or the other way around, you go to sleep but you wake up in the middle of the night and immediately your mind is elsewhere, and that's anxiety. The other one is depression, and depression is another common cause for either sleeping too much or too little. And these are important aspects in when someone comes to talk to us about a sleep problem that we must pick up on. And not everything has to be treated with medicine when it comes to sleep disorders. You need to find the cause. And in the majority of cases, indeed, we do find that changing your lifestyle and addressing these other underlying psychological issues can make people's lives much better. I know a number of people, especially in the last 6-7 months, have come through and said, I just can't sleep. And it will be very easy to just throw tablets at them to say, this will help you sleep and make you drowsy. But the actual underlying problem is that they're anxious, or they're worried about the job, or their mother passed away 2 months ago and now they're the carer for their dad who's unwell. And it's when you address those things that makes people sleep much better.
Okay. Now, you talked about sleep hygiene earlier. Talk about that and the importance of the same.
Absolutely. And indeed, when someone is talking to us about the sleep problem, we as physicians, we take a story. We ask them, how do you sleep? So tell us your day from waking to going to sleep and waking up again. And the most important thing is certainly the process that people do when they're trying to get to sleep. And ideally, you should have what we call this sleep hygiene. When you come back from work, you have some time to relax for yourself. You should exercise, hopefully, maybe 20-30 minutes, make yourself a bit tired. Have a dinner that's early, not late. And when it's about an hour or so to when you physically want to get to bed, that's when you're ready turning down your TVs, your radios. You should not have any alcohol or caffeine-related drinks, certainly since 7 o'clock in the evening. And say you normally go to bed at 10 o'clock. By 9:30 you're in the room, there's no TV in your room, you're not on your tablet. Tablets have a lot of blue light that activates the brain even more. And it should be a warm, cozy environment, the light should be dim, and then you go to sleep. As I mentioned before, with the advent of 24/7 cities, and technology being everywhere and Netflix, on the go, people are always on their tablets, or people are not exercising for various reasons, and that in itself causes disruption in how you go to sleep. So having good sleep hygiene is a key step in ensuring that you can address your sleep problems just by making sure you do it correctly.
Okay, now some individual questions coming through. Cosmos had asked, what causes one to sleepwalk?
Yeah, so sleepwalking is an example of non-REM parasomnia. And non-REM, it's you're being disrupted from your normal sleep. And essentially you're still in control of your body, and you can walk, and some people even talk. So it's an example of a non-REM parasomnia. What causes that, again, can be due to the things I've talked about. So some people do find triggers being that they're jet-lagged, that can cause them to sleepwalk, or they drink too much alcohol, or they're sleep-deprived. And sometimes when you resolve those issues, the sleepwalking can go away. Mm-hmm. So it's an example of a non-REM parasomnia.
Another question coming through, talk more about teeth grinding, because they've actually experienced or seen it in their child.
That's interesting, and I think that's something that they should go and see a specialist about. Teeth grinding is a bit complex. There's many reasons behind it. It happening in a child would require them to at least see a pediatrician to find out that there's no other reason that they're doing that. Things that go abnormal in the night don't necessarily have to mean that it could be sleep related. Some people can grind their teeth because, for example, they may be having a seizure. I'm not saying that that's the case in this child, but they do need to be assessed. Teeth grinding, certainly in adults, is another example of a non-REM parasomnia. And again, what causes teeth grinding? Stress, anxiety, all these things need to be addressed.
And another question here, when I go to sleep 6 to 8 hours, but still wake up tired, what am I dealing with?
And that's a very important topic. Some people have this this sense that they slept the right amount of time, but it's actually the quality of sleep that is important. And it brings up this whole other diagnosis or disease called obstructive sleep apnea. So obstructive sleep apnea is exactly what it says. So you're obstructing your airway, and therefore you don't breathe properly overnight. And this happens in particularly people who are overweight, and who, and especially in the male gender, and because of the high weight they have around the neck, when they are going to sleep, the airway actually slowly closes as they're sleeping. And when that happens, they can't breathe properly, so you can't oxygenate your blood properly as well. And that does not allow you to go into your REM sleep. So you just continue to have this cycle of the non-REM sleep, but you never get the chance to actually go into the restful state, or the most important